Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your life? I have, by my uncle. And it nearly destroyed me. It all started at a family gathering 2 years ago. My uncle, Mark, has always been the life of the party. Everyone adores him, including me. But his son, Josh, is another story. He's spoiled, reckless, and constantly in trouble. That night, things took a dark turn. My grandmother's antique bracelet went missing. It's worth thousands and holds immense sentimental value. The whole family searched the house, tensions running high. Suddenly, Uncle Mark pulled me aside. I need you to take the fall for this, he whispered, his eyes darting nervously. Josh took it, but if your grandmother finds out, it'll ruin him. Just say you borrowed it and forgot to put it back. I was stunned. How could he ask me to do this? When I refused, he changed tactics. The next thing I knew, Mark had planted the bracelet in my bag. Grandma found it there, and the look of disappointment in her eyes broke me. No one believed me when I said I was framed. Not even my parents. I became the family outcast, and Josh. He got off scot-free. But karma has its way. Last month, Josh was caught trying to sell another of Grandma's antiques. When questioned, he confessed everything, including how his father had framed me. My name was finally cleared, but the damage was done. My family trust. Shattered. Now, Uncle Mark and Josh are the family's black sheep, while I've rebuilt my life. It's bittersweet, but I've learned one thing: the truth always finds a way to come out. Growing up in the small coastal town of Clearwater, my life had always been quiet, predictable even. My mornings started with the salty scent of the ocean drifting through my bedroom window and ended with the distant hum of fishing boats returning to the harbor. Everyone knew everyone, and for better or worse, secrets didn't stay hidden for long. My family ran a modest bakery, Sunrise Sweets, right on the edge of Main Street. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills and gave my parents a sense of purpose. My mom, Caroline, was the heart of the place, her laughter ringing out as she handed warm pastries to eager customers. My dad, Robert, handled the logistics, always muttering about flour prices and oven maintenance. Then there was me, Ellie, their only child and reluctant heir to the bakery legacy. I didn't resent the bakery, not really. It's just that I had dreams that stretched far beyond Clearwater's borders. I wanted to be an artist, to capture the beauty of the world on canvas. My parents supported me in their way, but I knew they hoped I'd eventually settle down and take over the family business. Dream big, Ellie, Mom would say, her hands dusted with flour, but don't forget where you come from. The only person who truly understood my restlessness was my best friend, Mia. We'd been inseparable since kindergarten, bound by our shared love of sketching in the margins of our school notebooks and dreaming of lives that didn't revolve around Clearwater's unchanging rhythms. Mia was the daring one, always pushing boundaries and dragging me along for the ride. You've got to take risks, Ellie, she'd say, her green eyes alight with mischief. How else will you ever make it out of this place? Life in Clearwater might have been predictable, but it wasn't without its shadows. My uncle, Peter, was a constant source of tension in our family. Once a successful fisherman, he'd fallen on hard times after a string of bad investments. He'd borrowed money from my parents more times than I could count, always promising to pay it back but never quite managing to. He's family, Dad would say whenever Mom complained. We have to help him. But Uncle Peter's troubles didn't stop at finances. Rumors swirled around town about his gambling debts and shady dealing. Mom tried to shield me from the worst of it, but I wasn't a kid anymore. I saw the strain in her eyes whenever Peter showed up unannounced, the way Dad's jaw tightened as they spoke in hushed tones. Something was brewing beneath the surface, something that felt like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as Mia and I sat on the rocky beach sketching the waves, she turned to me with a serious look. Have you noticed anything off about Peter lately? She asked. I glanced at her, surprised. Mia's family owned one of the fishing boats, so she often heard the latest gossip before I did. What do you mean? I asked, setting my pencil down. She hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns in the sand. My dad says he's been hanging around with some rough types. People from out of town. He thinks Peter's in deeper trouble than he's letting on. A chill ran through me, despite the warm summer breeze. Do you think he's dangerous? Mia shrugged, but the concern in her eyes was unmistakable. I don't know. Just, be careful, okay? That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows danced across it. My mind raced with thoughts of Uncle Peter and the unspoken tension that seemed to follow him everywhere. For the first time, Clearwater didn't feel so predictable. It felt like a ticking time bomb, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my family was standing right at the center of it. The first sign that something was truly wrong came a week later, during one of Uncle Peter's late-night visits to the bakery. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen, their voices muffled but tense as they spoke in hurried whispers. I was upstairs in my room, trying to focus on a new painting, but their tone pulled my attention like a magnet. Carefully, I crept down the stairs, stopping just short of the kitchen door. Peter, this is the last time, Dad said, his voice heavy with frustration. I can't keep covering for you. If Caroline finds out how much we've loaned you, she won't find out, Peter interrupted, his tone sharp. Look, Rob, this is the big one. I've got a deal lined up that'll clear everything. I just need a little more time. You said that last time, Mom snapped. Her anger was rare, but when it surfaced, it was like a storm. What happens if this deal falls through? What are we supposed to do then? Peter didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. Trust me. Just one more chance. I backed away, heart pounding. Something about the desperation in Peter's voice unsettled me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents were being pulled into something dangerous. The next morning, when Mom and Dad acted as if nothing was wrong, I tried to push the conversation from my mind. But the tension in the air lingered, like the calm before a storm. The storm broke 2 days later. I was helping Mom at the bakery when a man walked in, someone I'd never seen before. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar running down the side of his face. His presence was intimidating, and when he spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. I'm looking for Peter, he said, his gaze fixed on Mom. Mom hesitated, glancing at me before responding. He's not here. Can I help you with something? The man's expression didn't change. Tell him Martin stopped by. He knows what it's about. Without another word, he turned and left, leaving an icy silence in his wake. Mom's hands were trembling as she gripped the counter. Ellie, take over for a bit. I need to make a call. I nodded, pretending not to notice the fear in her eyes. As soon as she disappeared into the back room, I pulled out my phone and texted Mia. Something's going on with Peter. Some guy named Martin just came looking for him. Mom's freaking out. Mia responded almost instantly. I'll be right there. True to her word, Mia showed up within minutes. We huddled in a corner of the bakery, whispering like we had when we were kids planning mischief. Martin's bad news, Mia said. Dad's mentioned him before. He's involved in some pretty shady stuff. If he's looking for Peter, it's not for anything good. The knot in my stomach tightened. What do we do? I mean, if Peter's in trouble, doesn't that mean my parents could be, too? Mia's expression was grim. Maybe, but we need more information before we do anything. Do you think you can talk to your dad about it? I shook my head. He'd just brush it off, like always. I'll have to figure something else out. That something else came sooner than I expected. Later that night, I caught Peter sneaking out of the house with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Curiosity and a gnawing sense of dread pushed me to follow him, keeping to the shadows as he made his way to the docks. There, under the flickering light of a street lamp, he met with Martin. You're late, Martin said, his voice carrying easily over the quiet lapping of the waves. I've got what you wanted, Peter replied, unzipping the duffel bag to reveal stacks of cash. My breath caught in my throat. Where had he gotten that kind of money? Martin inspected the bag, then nodded. This will cover part of it. But you're still short. Peter's shoulders slumped. I just need more time. Martin's expression hardened. You're out of time, Peter. If you don't pay up by the end of the week, your family's going to start feeling the consequences. My stomach turned as the implication sank in. I backed away, desperate to get out of there before they noticed me. As soon as I was far enough away, I ran home, my mind racing. I needed to tell someone, but who? My parents were too close to the situation, and Mia, well, even she might not know what to do with this. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Peter's behavior grew more erratic, and the bakery became a minefield of unspoken tensions. Mom and Dad tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but it was clear they were just as on edge as I was. Meanwhile, Martin's threat loomed over us all, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered Peter in the bakery storeroom, my heart pounding as I confronted him. I know about Martin, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I know you owe him money, and I know he's threatening our family. Peter's face went pale. Ellie, you don't understand. Then make me understand, I shot back. Because right now, it looks like you're dragging us all into your mess. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not that simple. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I needed a way to fix things, to get back on my feet. Martin seemed like the answer at the time. And now? I demanded. What are you going to do now? Peter didn't answer, and that silence spoke volume. For the first time, I realized just how deep we were in, and how far I might have to go to protect my family. The evening air was thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket that only added to the weight in my chest. I'd followed Peter again, this time with no intention of staying hidden. Whatever was about to happen, I needed answers, and I needed them now. The docks were eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of a boat shifting against its moorings. Shadows stretched long and menacing under the flickering streetlights as I approached the same spot where Peter and Martin had met before. Peter was already there, pacing like a caged animal. His movements were frantic, his hands tugging at his hair as if trying to pull answers from his mind. I stepped into the light, and he froze, his eyes widening when he saw me. Ellie, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? You need to leave. Now. No, I said firmly, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on. What's Martin got on you, Peter? Why is he threatening our family? Before he could answer, a shadow moved in the periphery of my vision. Martin stepped into the light, flanked by two men who looked like they'd stepped straight out of a crime drama. My heart pounded as his cold, calculating gaze settled on me. Well, Martin drawled, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Looks like Peter brought company. Care to introduce us? Peter stepped in front of me, his body a protective barrier. She's got nothing to do with this. Let her go. Martin chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Oh, I think she's got everything to do with this. Family's important, isn't it, Peter? And right now, your family's future depends on you holding up your end of the deal. What deal? I demanded, stepping out from behind Peter. My fear was still there, clawing at the edges of my resolve, but anger burned brighter. What does he owe you? Martin's smirk grew. Your uncle here borrowed a substantial amount of money from me. Said he had a sure thing that would pay off big. Only, it didn't. And now, he's in a bit of a bind. I'm trying to pay it back, Peter said quickly. You know I am. Not fast enough, Martin snapped, his voice hardening. Time's up, Peter. I've been patient, but my patience has limits. If you can't pay, I'll have to take payment another way. His eyes flicked to me, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. No, Peter said, his voice desperate. Leave her out of this. I'll figure something out. Just give me a little more time. Time isn't free, Martin said, his tone almost bored. And neither is trust. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to do exactly what I say when I say it, or your pretty little niece here. Enough. I shouted, cutting him off. My voice echoed across the docks, surprising everyone, including myself. I stepped forward, my hands clenched into fists. You're not going to touch me, and you're not going to threaten my family anymore. If Peter owes you money, we'll figure out how to pay it, but you're done using fear to get what you want. Martin's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You've got guts, kid, I'll give you that. But guts won't get you very far in my world. Maybe not, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my stomach. But you've made your point. Now it's my turn. You say Peter owes you money? Fine. Let's see the proof. Show me exactly how much he owes and what the terms of your agreement were. Martin's smirk faltered, just for a moment. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll go straight to the police, I said. And while they might not be able to pin anything on you, they'll sure as hell make your life difficult. How many deals do you think you'll be able to make with Clearwater's finest breathing down your neck? The silence that followed was deafening. Peter stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and something that looked almost like pride. Martin, on the other hand, looked as though he was weighing his options, his jaw tight and his eyes calculating. Finally, he nodded in a slow, deliberate motion. Fine. You've got until the end of the week to come up with the money. But if you're late, or if you try to pull something like this again, there won't be any warnings. Do we understand each other? I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. We understand. Martin gestured to his men, and they turned and disappeared into the shadows as suddenly as they'd appeared. He lingered for a moment, his gaze locking onto mine. You've got fire, kid. Don't let it burn you. Then he was gone, leaving Peter and me alone under the flickering streetlight. Peter sank onto a nearby crate, his head in his hands. Ellie, I don't even know what to say. Then don't, I said, my voice softer now. Just tell me the truth from now on. No more lies, Peter. We're going to fix this, but I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that? He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. Yeah, I can. The knot in my chest loosened, just slightly. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like we had a chance. And I was going to do everything in my power to make such docks were eerily silent as Peter and I walked back to the car. Neither of us spoke, the weight of what had just transpired hanging heavy in the air. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, relief, and an unexpected surge of determination. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we had taken a step toward reclaiming control from the chaos that had consumed our lives. Back at the house, the kitchen light was still on. Mom and Dad were sitting at the table, their faces etched with worry. They looked up as we walked in, and Mom immediately stood, her eyes scanning me for any sign of harm. Ellie, what happened? She asked, her voice trembling. I glanced at Peter, who nodded silently, urging me to take the lead. We confronted Martin, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He's agreed to give us until the end of the week to pay what Peter owes, but we have to act fast. Dad's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he looked at Peter. How much? Peter hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. 30,000, he muttered. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Peter, how could you? I didn't mean for it to get this bad, Peter said, his voice breaking. I thought I could turn things around, but every time I tried, it just got worse. And now I've put all of you in danger. We'll figure it out, I said firmly, cutting through the tension. We have to. But Peter, you need to be honest with us from now on. No more secrets. Peter nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I promise. No more secrets. Over the next few days, we worked together as a family to scrape together the money. Dad cashed out a portion of his retirement savings, while Mom reached out to a few trusted friends for loans. I even sold some of my artwork, posting it online with a sense of urgency that resonated with buyers. Every small victory felt like a step closer to safety, but the clock was ticking, and the pressure was immense. By the end of the week, we had managed to gather most of the money. Peter contacted Martin to arrange the handoff, and I insisted on coming along, unwilling to let him face this alone. We met Martin in a neutral location, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. Peter handed over the money without a word, and Martin counted it meticulously before giving a curt nod. You're lucky, Martin said, his tone cold but devoid of malice. This clears your debt. But let this be a lesson, Peter. Don't come knocking on my door again. As we walked away, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The immediate danger was over, but the scars it left behind would take time to heal. Back at home, we sat around the kitchen table once more, this time with a sense of fragile hope. We made it, Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. But we can't let this happen again. We have to stick together, no matter what. Peter nodded, his face solemn. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I owe all of you that much. As the days passed, life slowly began to return to normal. Peter took on extra shifts at the bakery, determined to repay every penny of what Mom and Dad had sacrificed. I threw myself into my art, channeling the chaos and emotion of the past weeks into something tangible. The experience had changed us all, but it had also brought us closer together in a way I hadn't thought possible. One evening, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, Peter came in and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a receipt for a payment he'd made to Mom and Dad's savings account, along with a note that simply read, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek. For all the pain and fear we'd endured, we had come out stronger. And as I looked around at my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Weeks passed, and the weight of those harrowing events began to ease. The fear that had once gripped our family loosened its hold, replaced by a cautious optimism. Life didn't snap back to normal, it shifted, reshaped by the trials we'd faced and the lessons we'd learned. For the first time, I felt like we were no longer just surviving, we were moving forward. Peter's transformation was the most striking. He'd always been the charming, carefree uncle, the one who could make anyone laugh but rarely took life seriously. Now, there was a quiet determination in him. He worked tirelessly, not just to repay what he owed but to rebuild the trust he'd nearly shattered. Every paycheck he earned went toward repaying Mom and Dad's savings, a small step toward mending the cracks in our family's foundation. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Peter turned to me, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "Ellie, I don't think I've ever thanked you properly. You stood up to Martin when I couldn't. You saved me, saved us." I shook my head, smiling faintly. "You would have done the same for me, Peter. Family sticks together, right?" He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Right. But I'm done putting you all in that position. No more shortcuts, no more secrets. I promise." Hearing those words felt like a victory in itself. Peter had always been the one who ran from his problems, but now he was facing them head-on. It gave me hope that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and effort. As for me, the ordeal had changed how I saw the world. I'd always thought of myself as someone who stayed in the background, avoiding conflict at all costs. But when it mattered most, I'd found a strength I didn't know I had. It wasn't just about protecting Peter. It was about standing up for what was right, even when fear threatened to overwhelm me. That's a lesson I knew I'd carry with me forever. One night, as I worked on a new painting, a sprawling depiction of stormy seas giving way to calm waters, Mom came into the room. She stood silently for a moment, then placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've grown so much, Ellie," she said softly. "What you did for Peter, for all of us. I'm so proud of you." Her words brought a lump to my throat, but I managed to smile. "We all did our part, Mom. We made it through together." As she left, I turned back to my painting, adding the final brushstroke to the peaceful horizon. The storm had passed, but its memory would remain, a reminder of our resilience and the unbreakable bond that held us together. And as I put my brush down, I thought, sometimes, it's in the darkest moments that we discover what we're truly capable of. And that realization, that strength, is the light that guides us forward.